Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a list of some new fantasy books that have come out this quarter. I will have timestamps if you'd like to skip ahead to one of these specific books, but the three that I'll be discussing would be The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, The Crane Husband, and then it's barely fantasy. There is a little bit of fantasy, it's barely fantasy, but Spy Family. I really just want an excuse to talk about this one some more because it's so delightful. Before getting into it, just a heads up, there is a bird chirping so loud outside my window. Hopefully you can't hear it. If you do, hopefully you find it charming and not distracting. But I just wanted to give that heads up, so if you hear it, you're like, what the heck is that? You'll know that it's just a nice little birdie enjoying springtime. Jumping into it, I'm going to start with The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi. So if you're curious, this does take place within the same world as this author's City of Brass trilogy, the Daevabad trilogy, but you don't have to read that trilogy in order to read this. They exist at different times, so they don't necessarily overlap. There are some hints in this that you might have that are kind of alluding to things that you'll see in City of Brass, but really they're truly very, very separate stories. So this follows, as the title implies, Amina al-Sirafi, and she is a lady pirate. She is the head of a ship. She's a captain of this ship that she absolutely loves. She loves the life that she lives, but she's had to leave that all behind so that she can take care of her young daughter. And then one day, a certain individual shows up on her door who has a mission for her, and not only does this mission's price seem enticing, but the sea is calling, and she just wants to go on one last adventure. And that's what she tells herself. It's just one last adventure so that she can have enough money to set her daughter up for a bright and secure future. However, the mission is not exactly what it seems. The individual who's trying to hire her has kept some things in the dark, and thus this mission is not as cut and dry as Amina was led to believe. This is peak adventure fantasy. If you're somebody who doesn't really like adventure fantasy because it feels too meandering, it feels too like it's just fly by the seat of your pants, whatever transpires, transpires. If you don't like the unexpectedness of adventure fantasy, then this probably isn't going to be appealing to you. If you also don't like that swashbuckling tone to certain fantasy stories, this also probably isn't for you. But if either of those things are intriguing to you, or if you love those things, then absolutely pick this up. It is truly peak adventure fantasy. I think that the main character, Amina, is also very engaging. She has a ton of personality. And so a lot of times in adventure stories, you kind of have that character who, they're a simple farm boy or something like that, where the characters themselves, they maybe develop as the journey goes on, or maybe character relationships develop as the story progresses. And in this story, Amina is a force to be reckoned with. She is somebody who's very, very captivating. And so she, all on her own, can be in basically any kind of a setting, and the story will be interesting just by her personality alone. But couple that with a really, it feels very well fleshed out world that I don't know too many other stories where I have found the setting to be as captivating as this one. It's our own world, but there's obviously magic tied into it, and the magic is certain beings and certain things that occur are very unexpected because we don't see them in fantasy very often. A lot of times our fantasy is rooted in Europe, and so we're familiar with the Fae, we're familiar with elves, and we're familiar with the kinds of architecture, the kinds of culture and customs that you tend to find in European or Western settings. And even if it's fantasy where it's completely removed from our own world, it's often still inspired by that part of our world, and often medieval times. So to see a story that is focused in on a different part of the world and the different kinds of creatures that you encounter on this journey, I found myself, as I was reading, looking up the various different things that would occur, or not occur, but the various beings that we would come in contact with. I would look them up and look up fan art, and it was really exciting. It was really exciting because I think so many of us are pretty done with the Fae stories. We're not opposed to magical beings, but it kind of doesn't have that same excitement and originality that it once had. And so inherently is much more fresh. So that aspect is also really exciting. It did not have quite as much depth maybe as I was hoping. I think even though there are darker moments and even though there are great character moments, it does still kind of sit in this high, fun, adventurous place. But I still really, really ultimately quite enjoyed it. And I think that the author set up future installments seamlessly. And it's also one where when I first started it, I was liking it well enough, but I wasn't necessarily incredibly engrossed in the story. But it just kind of snowballed in a good way, where it just kind of kept building and kept building and kept building, so that by the end, I was really interested in what was going to happen next. Overall, definitely really enjoyed this one. Had a lot of fun. Not an absolute new favorite, but definitely a series that I'm going to be continuing on with. Next up, we have Spy Family. Over on my side channel, I did a whole review for the first 9 volumes. It is non-spoiler, so if you're interested in hearing more thoughts, I'll have that linked. But regardless, Spy Family is adorable. It is hardly fantasy, but there's just enough fantasy where I feel like I can talk about it in this video. I really just want everybody to read it because it is so delightful, absolutely a new favorite, and it's so much fun. It puts me in such a good mood. It makes me laugh constantly. The setup is that you're following a man named Lloyd Forger, who is a spy. There is a lot of tension between the East and the West in their world, and to try and keep war from breaking out, Lloyd is tasked with a certain mission that involves having a daughter and a wife. And he is not provided with fellow spies, so he has to literally come up with a family all on his own, and Lloyd is nothing but a professional. So he manages to find a woman who will marry him, and he manages to find a child who he will adopt and become a father to. And the reason that he needs this family is he needs his child to get into this elite school, and from there his child is hopefully going to befriend the son of a political figure that he needs to get close to. So that's the setup for the story. The reason that I'm considering it within this new fantasy releases is because the daughter has the ability to read people's minds. And when I heard that, I thought, I had this impression, her name's Anya, that she was going to be brilliant and so intuitive. And she is just a bumbling, goofy, weird, small child who happens to be able to read people's thoughts. And so she's often hearing Lloyd's thoughts about being a spy, and she thinks it's so cool. The woman that Lloyd marries is an assassin. He does not know she's an assassin. She does not know he's a spy. How they end up together is absolutely ridiculous and very entertaining. Anya also knows that she is an assassin. So she knows her parents have these really intense, sometimes violent professions, and she can't let them know that she knows, because then they'll know that she has the ability to read people's minds, and then she's afraid of what will come about if they discover that. It is very ridiculous. It's very entertaining. It also feels like it's very satirical, both toward other anime and manga, and then also towards the spy genre. If you watch the anime adaptation, even the music, which the music is great, but even the music feels like it's a play off of a lot of spy music that you hear all the time, and just some of the tropes that are utilized. They're utilized in the absolute best of ways, but it does not take itself seriously whatsoever. It knows how silly it is, but it has a surprising amount of moments that really pull at your heart. It's just their family unit, the found family aspect of the story is absolutely wonderful. I said before that it's delightful, and I can't really use that word enough. It is so delightful. It's so fun. Even if you're not normally somebody who picks up manga, I would at least recommend watching the anime. It's phenomenal. And volume 9 has made me very, very, very excited for volume 10. I'm upset that we have to wait so long. Last, we have The Crane Husband. It's quite heavy. It's a story that it isn't necessarily compulsively readable due to the darker subject matter. It is exceptionally short, so you could likely get through it very quickly, but it's not really a good time. I did ultimately really like it though. It's very artistic. in how it's written, specifically in its more metaphorical sense. So the setup is that we are looking at our own world, and we have a young girl who is a teenager, and she is living in a more rural area in the United States, the Midwest area. And her mother, her single mom, one day brings home a crane that is the size of a man, and the mother has a relationship with this crane, which sounds absurd, but none of that is really looked at as if it's odd, and it's not like there's tons of crane people walking around. It is very metaphorical in that it's representing a new figure into a home who is not gentle or kind. It is a story that is examining domestic abuse. It also looks at generational trauma. There's quite a few other things that you can take from this due to its more artistic nature. I absolutely think this would be a fantastic book to buddy read if you're somebody who hosts book clubs. I know sometimes people do book clubs for their works. I think that this would be a great one to pick because there's so much substance to it. There's so much to dissect, and there's so much to try and gain from it. There's a lot of different interpretations that you could have for various different things that are occurring. This hit pretty hard for me. I think even if you haven't experienced this sort of thing before, it's not like the metaphor in regards to domestic abuse is like, what is it even saying? It's very clear. It's talking about domestic abuse. It's very clear how it affects a child, the way it forces a child to grow up much faster than they would have otherwise, the way it can be so all-consuming, the way it can be so distracting. It captures that exceptionally well. I actually said, after I read it, I texted my sister and I was like, hey, you might like this book. And that's kind of my way of being like, it's hard to talk about our childhood, but maybe read this because I know we both went through stuff. So if that speaks to you, if you're somebody who experienced a unhealthy environment in your upbringing, if you know somebody who did, you're probably going to resonate really strongly with the themes in this book. There are some other themes that are less clear. It has to do with the fact that there's a conglomerate that has taken over land, and there are people that live on these farms, but they only live in the houses now. They don't own the land near them anymore. And it's essentially like these corporations have all come together to purchase land, and there's some things to dissect about that. This idea of people no longer having their roots, of having their land taken from them, of having, it feels like, no agency in their own lives, whether that be literally in their own home or what is around them. And there's a lot of really beautiful passages. I really liked the writing. The writing itself is not incredibly abstract, even though so much of the symbolism is a little out there. The writing itself is pretty clear, but it is very beautiful and kind of brutal at the same time. I really liked it. I really, really, really liked it. I do think that for some people, they'll pick it up and be like, this is weird, and they won't really get anything from it. I know that it's a very personal thing, but I would definitely recommend this one. I thought it was phenomenal. I already was planning on reading The Girl Who Drank the Moon, I think is her work for younger readers. So I was already planning on picking that one up at some point, and I definitely want to even more now. And then I discovered that she has written some other things that I am interested in. So I hope I enjoy the other works as much as this one. That's it for some new fantasy releases. If you're interested in any of these, I will have links in the description bar down below. And like I said before, I'll have my dedicated review for Spy Family linked as well. If you're planning on picking any of these up, let me know. I'd love to know. And if you have read them, let me know your thoughts on them. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.